So I see, or I hope you see how we're going with this panel, right? Short panelists, a short subject matter. I'm a controller also, I understand, our attention span is short. So we wanted to do this panel a little differently in the different increments and have different subject matter and kind of keep it moving. So our next panel is how I contribute to safety is discussing our Air Traffic Safety Action Program, or as we know it, Atsap. And that is one of our voluntary safety reporting programs. Now, a little history on Atsap. It was launched in 2008 as a collaborative effort between NATCA and the FAA, and then fully implemented in 2010. Now, Atsap was modeled after a very successful program used by airline pilots, cabin crew, dispatchers, and mechanics. And that program is known as ASAP, Aviation Safety Action Program. Now, the goal of Atsap was to increase the reporting safety events and problems so they can be utilized to evaluate, propose, and implement changes to further the goal of risk mitigation. Now, safety events are not just near collisions or potential aircraft accidents. They could be unsafe policy and procedures. They could be airport signage, unclear publication, human factors, equipment, or even software issues. And those are just to name a few. Now, to help us understand the benefits of safety reporting and what happens when we file, we have Erin Phelps, NATCA's Central Service Area Atsap Analyst, and also American Airlines Safety Team Captain Mark Woodall. All right, now in order to talk about this program, I have to use a lot of acronyms. Now in aviation, our language is spoken in acronyms. Now have you ever had a conversation with somebody in the industry and they're throwing out all these acronyms left and right, and in your brain, you're trying to define those acronyms at the same time being fully engaged? That happens to me all the time. So to help us all out, I thought I'd put up a slide with the definitions of some of our acronyms that we'll be using during our discussion.
Oops.
All right, so for Erin, we'll start with you. Some controllers feel like their Atsap reports don't matter. They don't see the results right away, if at all, and probably not as fast as they expect any results. So what would you say are the reasons controllers should file their Atsap reports?
You should file Atsap reports because they matter. The data and what you're sharing matters. As controllers, you're really the gatekeeper to the NAS. So when you're filing your Atsap reports into what our agency considers the primary means of reporting into Atsap, you're giving the data to somebody for discussion. Ways that is used is a lot of times the ERC may want more information. Maybe you had a weather event and you're telling me your frequency at a specific transmitter isn't working. Somebody on the ERC will reach out and clarify which specific frequency, because we really want to be detailed in our trend tracking and make sure we're tracking it to the accurate frequency. That can also look like an info share back to your facility. That would go back to your ATM generally and your NATCA FAC rep. We want to share your information, but we want to get your permission. So we have a good conversation about, sometimes a conversation or exchange messages to say, can we share this? It's redacted, it's de-identified. And that will go back to the facility level. And then the facility will interact with the ERC, and then the message eventually should make its way back to you to close that loop and tell you what's happened. Additionally, we use CISP, which has been touched on by Jason, and the CISP sharing program is important because when you talk about a call sign or an airline, if we have an agreement, we can share that to the airline, and that's what I do to make sure that they know about it. In the best scenarios, the airline is sharing something back to us, and we're seeing both sides of the picture and really being able to see what was happening to everyone during that situation. And to be detailed, it's not just the R side if you're in radar, it's not just the local controller. If you witnessed any type of event, whether it's systemic or an incident, it's important for every person that was there to share their information and tell us what you saw in detail. So that would be the CISP sharing. Atsap information also contributes and is the ATO's top 5 safety issues. We also see that follow into recurrent training, where we're determining what do the controllers need? What do you need a refresher on? What do we need a reminder on? And what has changed? That's driven by Atsap data. So it's really, if you are listening, you're hearing me say all of this is driven by you and what you know about what's happening in the field. We also go to data requests, which was touched on with the airspace. Increasingly important because procedures are changing. You're having LOAs, the controller work groups are looking for information. So this is also when we're implementing new technologies and equipment. They're coming to Atsap and saying, hey, what have you been hearing about this? Atsap wants to tell them this is what the field is saying. Again, from what I've heard is it's the primary means of reporting. So tell Atsap, because Atsap, when it's requested and approved, can share the data with the work groups. Additionally, I would say corrective action requests are a national ability to mitigate safety issues, and I think I covered a lot of the ways we use the data.
Yeah, so I'll touch a little bit on the data requests. We do get recurring data requests, so like construction at airports, wrong surface events, things like that. Those are recurring data requests that we process and get out to the requesters. But we also have data requests that are not recurring, that are just a one-time. And that could be airspace changes or something to that effect. So data requests are coming from those Atsap reports. That's the information that we use when people are requesting data requests. And touching a little bit on the CISP, you did mention CISP. Now, I do the CISP side. It's a very difficult acronym to say, very fast. And on the CISP side, I see a lot of pilot reports. I review all these de-identified pilot reports. And it's really interesting to try to match them with the Atsap reports because you get to see both sides of the story. So if something has gone on or something happens, it's really important to the CISP side and to the airline side to get a matching report. Because once I get a matching report, I do send it back to that airline so they can review that also. And maybe it's something on their side or maybe it's something on our side. But that's how we mend all that information, right? So we talked about CARs, corrective action requests. That is also data-driven. And I really can't emphasize that enough. When you file the Atsap, all of that, just taking the time to file it, all of that is driven towards all of these different entities. Now for Mark, thank you for joining us. You are part of the American Airlines safety team. There seems to be a mentality amongst controllers to not report because they might get maybe a pilot in trouble or something like that. But it seems like the pilot community is much more willing to report any mistakes or events that happen. Now, can you tell us about the reporting culture in the airlines?
Absolutely, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to sit here and speak to you today. So at American, we get about 800 reports a month. Now that might equate to, so that's the number of reports. That probably equates to about 500 events. Out of that 500 events, probably, let's call it 350 of them are probably of the general safety concern. So we have a very robust reporting program where we talk mainly about any general safety concerns. It might be an airport concern, it might be an airway concern, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But we do have a very robust culture. We started this program back in about 1994 is when we first started our program at American. And that actually set the base for all the airlines and all the ASAP programs throughout the industry. So we've got practice at it, I guess. As far as the confirmation, the CISP, or the Confidential Information Sharing Program, or CISP, that is any ASAP reports or any ASAP reports we get in that may have something to do with the ATC system or anything along those lines, we will then send them through this program over to Dawn, or now Betsy, I believe, at American, where they will share them that way. So that's kind of how that whole process works. But we do have a very robust reporting culture here at American.
Now, what are some of the things that pilots report versus what controllers report? Because you do see some of them matching in.
True. So that other 150 or so that I was talking about are those potential pilot deviations. It might be an altitude deviation, might be a heading deviation, it might be a speed deviation, it might be a confusion in a clearance, things along those lines. So that's a lot of the same kind of ideas that we do share between the two of us is, and as you said, there are always two sides to every story.
Definitely.
And so it's very important to understand what the pilot was seeing and at the same time understanding what the controller was seeing. And we see this quite a bit. that usually it's a communication. Here we go, that communication word again. But a lot of times that's what we're using is there's just a communication problem about what was the clearance, what really was supposed to happen there.
Yeah, and we have had times where we have looked at the replay. We've gotten both sides of the story, and they're opposite. And we've looked at the replay, and then it falls a little bit in the middle. You know, because what's happening on the flight deck, you guys are busy and things are going on, things are happening, and then what's happening with the controller. And there's sometimes a time lapse where we think we're super busy or you guys think you're super busy, and we listen to the replay and it's not exactly how everybody recalls it. So it's a really interesting way to come back together and see what's actually the big picture is. Now, Mark, what kind of changes are made at the airlines based on ASAP reports and what you have learned from CISP?
Well, so one of the things we do is every single one of the CISP reports that come into American, our ERC team looks at them. And we review them to decide if it's something like a similar sounding call sign or something that may have affected one of our airplanes, but the crews may not have actually known it, then we'll kind of go, okay, thank you very much for that report. We'll file it away. But sometimes we see some of those reports that are very important for us to see, for us to reach back to the crew and go, hey, you know, can we get your idea about what happened on that particular report? We should never think that we're trying to get the pilots in trouble. Remember, everything that we do is de-identified anyway. But we're about trying to make the national airspace system the safest we can. One of the issues that we had here not too terribly long ago was a crew that was coming into Memphis. And they got vectored off the airway, or the arrival, I'm sorry. And as they were vectored off the arrival, eventually the controller said, okay, I've got my required spacing. I'm going to clear you direct to the Blues intersection, which you can see right there on the arrival. Well, as the crew was going through their FMS and getting it all set up for the approach, because they thought they were going to go get vectored directly into the approach, they went to this Blues intersection. So as you can see, there was a big confusion part right there. So this one went through ASAP process. We talked to the ATC controllers, and we eventually got it renamed to a different intersection there. And it's those kind of things that we see as we come through the process of reporting. And it's not to get somebody in trouble, it's to make the national airspace system much safer.
Now, every month, Atsap puts out safe sheets. They're Atsap based and they're CISP based. Do the airlines utilize those at all?
So one of the pillars of the SMS system is publications, safety publications. And we do have a safety publication that comes out. And in that safety publication, we do take those CISP safe sheets and Atsap safe sheets, and we publish them there for all the airlines, for all the pilots to read as they go through that. So yeah, that information is getting out not just to y'all, but it's also getting out to our folks as well.
Now, we do have a couple of Slido questions coming up that I think are an important thing to answer. Why must we file an Atsap if we know the issue? Why not just make the Atsap for things that we have issues with?
So filing Atsap, if it's a known issue, is it increases traction. If you file it once and maybe there's been a delay and then the question becomes, well, is it still happening? So it's really up to the workforce to continue to tell us it's still happening. This is still an issue. Additionally, across the service areas, the analysts send you messages to tell you about the closure of your report. Sometimes it's, hey, thanks for reporting. Other times it's a little more detailed. You can reply back to that and tell us if you have a thought about that message, and then we will bring it back to the ERC. So really it's just, don't stop reporting. Your voice matters, and as we discussed, the reports have significant importance.
Yeah, I would say something, if you don't mind. It's kind of the squeaky wheel part, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and if it's a one-off thing, I'll go, okay, great, thanks, appreciate it. Maybe it was just a one-time deal. But if we get 20 reports about the same thing, then we know, aha, something's up there, and we'll look into that.
Yeah.
And then also to add with that, with the squeaky wheel, is details. Date, time, call signs, tell us the details. That helps us get the replays. It helps us dive a little bit farther, and the ERC can get into what you're talking about. If it's just, today was awful, we had weather again, and we didn't have X, we needed the safety data is what they consider it. So the details are exceptional.
This was a great one. What are some of the best practices you've seen some facilities utilize to maximize reporting?
I would say the conversation about, well, we talked about this a little bit earlier. So a lot of times your crew or your team is recognizing there's an issue, and everybody's going to report. However, the thought that everybody's reporting, if you don't report, well, it's okay because everybody else is doing it. So the conversation follow through. Where it has to be is advertising, the conversation, the follow through. Remembering that if you need your login, we can help you with that. Atsapsafety.org, contact us. New trainees, once they're certified or maybe when they're finally into working traffic, a trainer should have a conversation with them. Bring it back up. You go through your Atsap training within, I think, approximately the first 30 days you come into your facility. There's a whole lot of that you're getting a lot of information in 30 days. So as a facility and as leaders that you are, revisit that. Make sure your teams know how to use it and talk about it. And if you see something, mention, hey, that would be a great Atsap report. And if you all collectively are going to Atsap, which I'm grateful for, don't copy and paste each other's Atsap. If one person writes a phenomenal Atsap, your take on it, your viewpoint matters. It's not as squeaky if 6 of you give me the same exact Atsap. So your take on it and your independent review is extremely important.
Now, there aren't too many of us left that grew up in the agency before VSRP. While it's good to have the blame culture behind us, so we don't have to not file for fear of punishment, what are some new obstacles that keep controllers from filing?
Okay, we kind of touched on those just a little bit with the last question, but a lot of times submitters don't know their login and password. Atsapsafety.org, which is not a government website, by the way, so you don't have to be behind a firewall to access it. If that's helpful, you can even do it on your phone. And it says contact us, it will dial into an Atsap analyst that can help you through the process. If you ever encounter any issues with the software, it's another great way to talk about that and ask some questions. And you can also leave a voicemail if you need to. The other part is, I would say, sometimes it's something as simple as weren't allowed to get time at work. It was a really busy day, you wanted to fit in at work, it didn't work out. I would say there's a fair amount of really good intentions where the follow through kind of goes awry, where you wrote down the timestamp, because that's what we're asking for in the call signs, and you were going to get that Atsap done. Maybe you even started it and you didn't finish it. But just kind of that follow through, I strongly encourage that. Additionally, going back to everybody on the team is going to Atsap it, and then in turn nobody Atsaps it. It happens actually quite frequently where we're asked, hey, are you guys getting data on this? And it becomes, we're looking, and we're like, no. Well, everybody said they're filing. But, so we just, again, it's the follow through of that.
Yeah, and we understand that you get off sector or you get off position and you're tired and then you walk away. But it's best to file when that's fresh in your mind because we will get the most details out of it. A lot of times we rely on supervisors to file that MR. Well, they saw that, so I don't need to file it. There are times that we don't have MORs on events or situations. So your Atsap means a lot, and it really is important to file for that. And especially in communicating with the CIS program and all the other airlines. We have so many airline partners, in addition to dispatch. So we share information across both fields. So if the airlines need something, we help them out with information. And all that information sharing is helping us become a more safer airspace. So I wanted to end on, it's our NAS. When in doubt, fill it out. Please fill out your Atsaps. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.